So thanks for tuning in today. I'm Michael Olear from Olear Team, MJ Peterson. And what we're going to talk about today is preparing your house for sale. What are the 10 things you can do that are very critical to take a look at? What you're going for is maximum value, shortest period of time. Those are the two most important phrases when you're selling residential real estate. And I cannot underestimate the value of preparation. It really makes a big difference. You can absolutely sell a house just the way it is, and you could absolutely do that. The guy that trained me used to always say, price cures all objections, and it's really true. But here's some things to take a look at if you really want to maximize your value. I'm going to go backwards too. So number 10 is the front entryway. It has to be pristine. Houses were built to be entered from the front door. And one of the things, at least in our market, that's very prevalent is the majority of people either enter their own house through their garage or they use maybe a side or a back door. One of the things that's really important to remember is when you're selling your house, the buyers and their realtor are going to be coming through the front door. So that's where they're beginning to form an impression about whether or not they want to buy the house. So it's absolutely critical that that area is pristine. When I'm going to visit a seller for the first time, someone's thinking about selling their house, I always go to the front door and just evaluate it. Sometimes you'll see cobwebs, maybe the wood paneling, the wood framing is dirty, really needs to be painted. I really do see sometimes 3 or 4 weeks of soggy Metro newspapers. So it's really critical that that area where the first impression is being created, maybe it's second impression because they've seen, they've driven by already, but when they're walking up to the house, you want that to be really, really very, very nice. The next thing, let's call it number 9, is to depersonalize. The buying process for a buyer, what's going on in their head is they're trying to visualize themselves living in the house. Is this right for me, the size? A lot of people, maybe we counsel them to think about your daily routines, think about the things you do when you're entertaining. What kind of space needs do you have for your day in and day out activities? And it's much, much harder psychologically for people to put themselves into your house if there are lots of pictures of people that they don't know. So that's why if you ever walked into, say, a builder's model or a house that's been professionally staged, it's to the extreme of being depersonalized. I still think that it makes sense to have some of the things that are important to you, in terms of your kind of the character of the rooms. A lot of times it gives it pizzazz and excitement when parts of you are displayed, in certain respect, maybe souvenirs from travel or things that people have made that are unique. That kind of stuff very much can excite emotion, and that emotion leads to the buying decision. So sometimes with items like that, it's good to have them there. But in terms of gallery of family photos, I'd recommend against it, that you need to cut that down considerably, if not eliminate it 100%. Next item, let's call it number 8, is you need to create visual volume. And visual volume, what I'm talking about there, is making sure that there aren't any needless objects in the visual field when you're looking at a particular room. So let me give you an example of that. Sometimes I'll go into a house and near in one of the corners they'll have like a wooden dog that's painted that maybe looks like a dog that they used to own, or just something nice that they like to have in the house. It's important to remove a lot of those items that aren't really providing any functionality because you're creating visual volume. it's going to make the rooms look a lot bigger. Um, Sometimes I see people have baskets of magazines, maybe that are just piling up. Those kind of things need to go. The other thing, a really important staging concept to internalize and think about when you're doing this, is if you have end tables. My general rule of thumb is one lamp and then one other item, and that's the best way to stage, like say in a living room, family room, even a bedroom. If you have end tables next to a bed, it's good to have a lamp, maybe one other item, and depending on the size of the surface, perhaps maybe you could have another item, or maybe if it's really really small, all you want to have is a lamp. So it's a judgment call, but it's the kind of thing that when you walk through and really try to look at the house as a buyer would, these things will pop in your head. What we typically do with our sellers is we have a room by room checklist that we walk around and help them determine what are the best things to do to maximize their value. I think the other thing that's really critical, and sometimes it's very difficult for me to talk to people about, because sometimes it's sensitive, but smells. Smells. Again, the guy that trained me, I love this guy. He used to have all these phrases that I remember one time I told him, "Hey, I just sold a house." He's like, "Don't buy those new shoes yet," because you got to go through the whole home inspection, closing process, all that. But he used to say, if it smells, it won't sell, and that is so true. It's really, really critical. So if there are any pets on the premises, it's really important that any possible scent from them is not present when the buyers are coming. Also, in terms of cooking smells, anything at all like that, it's really important that it's fresh. You have to be very conscious of the five senses, because buyers are using all of them, when they're coming to buy a house. A basement that's musty, that can really be a turnoff. You can have the absolutely perfect house in a musty basement, and it will make it much more difficult to sell, and it'll also have a negative impact on the price. So those are things that are very important to consider, and a lot of times maybe there's no cost. Perhaps there's just a degree of effort, and the situation will be resolved favorably for you in your best interest. One of the things too that I see sometimes, it's our next one here is staging rooms for one purpose. And what I mean by that is to not have multiple things going on in one particular room. And if you're living a certain way because it's very functional for you, and it's very convenient, and it's a good use of your space. Let me give you an example. Sometimes you can go and see a house where the one of the extra bedrooms has office setup. Maybe there's a desk, a copy machine. Then there's a stairmaster, and then possibly some packing supplies for maybe mailing boxes to family or kids or something like that. So there's a lot going on in the one room. It's far better off, and sometimes you can't do all these things because a stairmaster is heavy and hard to take apart. Sometimes I go in and there's a stairmaster and there's a lot of clothes hanging on it. It's, that does happen too. So maybe if you're going to sell the house, you're committed to moving, the thing to do is to streamline it and make the room really functional for one purpose. So whether that would be a bedroom, it's going to be used as an office, it should be set up solely for that. It just, in the head of the buyer, most of the time, it's going to just resonate as being a very useful space. And of course we can say, well, they'll figure it out once they move in. Absolutely, that's certainly possible. But one of the things that you're dealing with in our current climate, with um, people are so busy. A lot of times they don't have the imagination and creativity that maybe is needed to see the full value. So, my opinion, as a seller, to create the most value as possible, taking these steps really does make a big difference and makes it attractive to the majority of the buying public, which is what you're going for with to achieve maximum value in the shortest period of time. Next one here. So we got four left. Uh, Packing and storing off-season clothes. This is something, if you're committed, you're going to move. I'm going to sell the house. Well, some people, what I hear often is, I don't want to spend another winter in this home. I hear that from people quite a bit that are tired of taking care of the outside or paying people to do that. So one of the really big things you can do is to pack and store off-season clothing. And as far as storage, one of the things that you can do, I'm a huge fan of using totes because they stack vertically. If you have a spot, it can be in a garage, in the corner of a bedroom. I don't advise lugging things down the stairs that will need to be lugged back up the stairs. But putting things in totes, maybe all the winter coats, uh, all your winter gear, get it all in and totes in a corner of a room out of the way, and then all of a sudden maybe you've really reduced the amount of things in your closets by maybe 20%. You can make a big impact by doing that. Next item, basement cleanliness is very, very important. And this is something that every time that we've sold a house, which has been a few times, um, we were planning it. We were thinking, okay, probably next year. If that's the case for you, even if you're thinking, well, in a few months, we're going to sell. And I make my checklist of all the things I'm going to do. And one of the things on my checklist is clean out the basement and maybe paint the walls because we have some, it's just kind of maybe old, that green color, or maybe I'm going to paint the floor, something like that, just to make it look really clean, rather than putting it off to the end of, all the list of things to do. I highly recommend doing that first. What happens then is if you do it a few months ahead of selling a house, by the time uh, you're ready to put it on the market, you don't have the smell of paint, and also you've allowed some time for some dirt and cobwebs to accumulate, so it doesn't look like you just painted it. But the reaction that buyers will have when they are going into your basement, they'll be remarking about how clean it is. And that's something that makes a huge difference to do something like that ahead of time. If you do it the week before you put the house up for sale, um, it smells like you just did it. And then you start raising questions of, are they trying to hide something? So one thing that people ask me that question a lot, when they're getting ready to put a house up for sale, should I do this? Should I bother with painting? And if it's so close to the actual event of listing the house, unless there's old discoloration for maybe some condition that's already been corrected, you're far better off just leaving it the way it is, and so it doesn't look like you're hiding anything. That's pretty important to be transparent about that. So number 2 on our list is barriers to financing. Very important to understand this and make sure that up front you have a really clear idea of what you're trying to sell. And this is something that a real estate person can help you with when they come to look at your house. Just to give you an example, say you have one crack in the basement wall, a vertical crack that maybe is weeping some water, and it's close to the sump hole, and it hasn't been a problem for the last 20 years because the water, goes right in the sump and then it's gone. One of the difficulties that will happen is that will come up not only on the home inspection, it'll also come up when the bank appraiser comes through the house. And the bank appraiser usually doesn't get there for at least 3 weeks after the house is sold. And typically by that time, mentally you've checked out. I mean, you're packing, you're ready to go, and then all of a sudden you get hit with something that you really weren't anticipating. It's really important to take a look at these items ahead of time. And I would also add to this list anything that's required by the municipality. Many towns have inspections that are required when you are conducting a real estate transaction, and any remediation that they ask for by law has to be done. So it's really, I consider it absolutely critical to have a really good understanding of this and make sure you got a clean bill of health before you put the house on the market. And one of the main reasons why, I mean, there's a lot, I already said one because of unexpected expenses, but the other thing that happens, say you got the scenario where you got the one crack on the basement wall. Any buyer that comes through there and their realtor is going to be saying, oh gosh, it's got the basement leaks. And it's in that scenario, it's actually not fair, because you're going to end up taking a lower price because the basement seepage, and then ultimately the bank appraiser is going to want something done. So really critical to get it done ahead of time so you get more money for the house, and then you don't have to worry about it later. Last item is reducing accumulation. And you really need to make a commitment to yourself to do this. This is the number one most important thing. So there's a variety of ways to proceed. I advise making a commitment to yourself to, a couple boxes a week. Decide on a number, set up a metric, because it's going to feel like overwhelming. And I would say just do one area at a time. There's different schools of thought that say to do all the clothes at once, or I'm a huge fan of one area at a time. That way your whole house isn't, in a shambles. But just do a little at a time, make a commitment to yourself, and it all gets done, and you make a whole lot more money by reducing accumulation. In a lot of cases, 5 to 10% or whatever the sale price is. So thanks for tuning in. Please let us know if we can answer any other questions you might have. And I hope you're having a good day. Take care.